Good morning and welcome to Counterpoints. Happy Wednesday, everybody. We've got a little bit of housekeeping. We've almost got everybody moved over from the old system to the new one.
Yes.
But we have a little bit of concierge help, right?
Yes.
To finish it off.
That's right. No breaker left behind. Just make sure that you look in the episode description and in today's email. If you're still searching for the YouTube and Spotify links, they're going to be there. Plus, if you're still having any issues, Griffin is here to help. He wants us to convey that no breaker will be left behind. That's his word. Those are his words directly. You can email support@locals.com and actually CC breakingpointspremium@gmail.com. That's also going to be in the episode description if you're still having any issues at all.
It's going to go to Griffin.
It's gonna go to Griffin. He's here to help.
White glove treatment.
Producer Griffin, while he's working on the show, he's also making sure that everyone gets taken care of in this transition period. So thanks everyone for sticking with us. Remember to subscribe if you want to get the Friday edition of this show, Counterpoints, early right to your inbox, and the full edition of this show early right to your inbox. No breaks, no cut up videos, nothing like that. Whole thing just goes straight to you. So that's the housekeeping for today. Also, Ryan's tie has been straightened out.
Yes.
We fixed that problem about 2 seconds before air.
Yeah, we don't want people feeling off balance watching the show.
Well, we kind of do.
No, a little bit, that's true. All right, so we're going to get into the fallout from the Rafah massacre, followed by a second Rafah massacre, followed by the White House twisting itself into knots to try to figure out whether or not Israel has launched an invasion, sort of like the kind of dystopian version of angels dancing on a pin, like how many IDF soldiers and tanks can like dance in the center of Rafah before it's an invasion, you know, bring all the philosophers out to try to figure this one out. Meanwhile, Mexico has joined the ICJ case that South Africa has brought, and Algeria is now saying that it's going to bring the ICC case before the Security Council. They're circulating a petition, they're circulating a resolution, which means that could be voted on in the next 5 or 10 days. We're going to talk about all of the politics around that. We've got Democrats absolutely freaking out, finally waking up and discovering that their nominee is Joe Biden.
Yes.
If they watched Counterpoints or Breaking Points regularly, we could have told them that was going to be your nominee, like it was headed that direction, and
yes.
He's not popular.
No, we knew that.
But apparently this is news to them, and it's causing a full-blown panic in Washington.
The real news to them is that the economy is actually not great. That's what they're learning.
People are not terribly happy about that. There was a poll showing that people think unemployment is the highest in like 40 years, when actually it's kind of the lowest in 40 years. Very, very weird times we're living in. Meanwhile, Donald Trump about to get convicted, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, jury, we'll talk about this, but the jury is quite literally out today.
Yeah.
So a verdict could basically come at any time. And
Secret Service was like scoping out the jail.
Yeah, that's a CBS News report we can get into. They buried that way down at the bottom of their story. If you're seeing 2024 on the screen, in addition to Biden, also Robert De Niro is out in the streets talking about how great New York is and how Donald Trump wants to destroy New York. We've got some really interesting footage from Manhattan yesterday. Jerry and Barry, not a new band. Actually, Jerry Seinfeld and Barry Weiss sat down for an interview. Harvard, at the same time, came out with this idea that they're now going to adhere to institutional neutrality. So we have some news on the campus front. And Ryan's friend, Javier Milei, a little plunge in the peso down in Argentina. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, and then Donald Trump with some new comments about whether or not he's going to pardon Assange. And if you're looking at that little ICC banner under there, under that we're also, or is it, I forget where we were going to talk about this. We're also going to talk about the new Georgia law that was passed to basically make foreign NGOs register as foreign agents, which has the State Department absolutely freaking out, and which has a lot of interesting implications for the Russia-Ukraine war and the kind of geopolitics around that region. And
one thing I want to add just before we get into the news of the day out of Israel, 20 deaths, actually 25 as of a few hours ago, 25 tornado deaths just across Memorial Day weekend from tornadoes that ripped through 7 states. So a lot of international news, a lot of domestic news. It's an election year, but my goodness, that's a horrible situation in so many communities throughout, what some folks would consider flyover country. It's just tough.
Yeah, indeed.
Absolutely.
Meanwhile, we can put up a 0 here. News is emerging that it was actually Boeing that produced the bomb that created the fire.
The GBU-39.
That led to that led to dozens of Palestinians being incinerated in what they had expected to be as a safe zone. We can put up A1 here. The reverberations of this kind of continue throughout the world, even as the Netanyahu accepted responsibility, said it was a quote tragic mistake, I think was his framing. Israel pledges going to investigate itself. There were renewed strikes on the same area. And actually, I think just reading from the first paragraph of this Associated Press article that we just put up gives you a sense of how the world is covering this and thinking about this at the moment. They write, Israeli shelling and airstrikes killed at least 37 people, most of them sheltering in tents outside the southern Gaza city of Rafah overnight and on Tuesday, pummeling the same area where strikes triggered a deadly fire days earlier in a camp for displaced Palestinians, according to witnesses, emergency workers, and hospital officials. Hard to think of a more devastating paragraph that a neutral news organization like the Associated Press could put together about anything going on in the world. People getting incinerated in tents just days after they were incinerated. Other people were incinerated in tents. And so this has left the State Department and the White House to scramble for answers. Let's take a look at how Matt Miller over the State Department handled this yesterday.
When it comes to the continuation of Israel using precision-guided munitions in Rafah, at this point, the U.S. still supports that.
We have made no change to our policy.
So is it a yes or no?
We have made no change to our policy. We have made clear that if there was a full-scale military operation, there would be some change. But as of yet, it's not a change that we made. We do support, as we always have, their ability to go after legitimate Hamas terrorists, and that, of course, includes using American-provided weapons. But we expect them to do so in a way that minimizes civilian harm. And
then just the last question. With regard to the reports of the Israeli tanks that are in central Rafah right now, I know you said you haven't verified those reports. Has the U.S. asked Israel about those reports and an explanation for why those tanks might be in central Rafah?
We are in constant dialogue with them about their military operations and potential military operations in Rafah. I'm not going to get into any specific conversations, but we are constantly interrogating them about what they're doing and what they're planning.
So it's safe to say you've interrogated them.
It's not going to go beyond that.
The IDF response, meanwhile, or I don't even know if this was the IDF or some kind of clowns associated with them, was to release what they said was audio of two Gazans talking in Rafah. If we can put this up on the screen. People immediately flagged a bunch of problems with this. They tried this exact thing months ago, and it was very quickly called out to be a fake conversation. Some of it just sounds fake in the way that people are so clearly and explicitly identifying themselves as and exonerating the IDF. But also, if you notice, any audio or any phone calls you hear from Gaza since, actually before October 7th, but accelerated since then, you hear drone footage. I mean, you hear drones in the background. It is just the ever-present sound of Gaza now. Somehow, the Israelis, who were doing a lot of surveillance, forgot to add in the drone sound in the background to add a little bit of kind of authenticity to that clip. Basically, what the clip was trying to say is that it was a Jeep that was filled with explosives that was owned by Hamas, and that's why it blew up. That was one of multiple different theories that have been thrown around since then. And you can put up actually we'll move to that in a second. Emily, what's your thought on the kind of Israeli response so far?
Well, I think it's interesting that Netanyahu came out and said that this was, quote, a tragic mistake, because I think that really is reflective of how much pressure he understands that he's under now, because their argument is essentially that they have the best civilian to military ratio of any modern army, and the implication of that is, yeah, a lot of civilians are dying, but it's at a rate that is in some way as just as can possibly be done. And to an extent, there's been a sort of owning right? And owning up to, and just sort of coldly owning up to the ratio, the deaths of civilians. And at this point, now that Netanyahu is caught between a rock and a hard place with the Biden administration, I do think it's interesting that he came out and said that this was a tragic mistake. When we're going to get to this in just a minute, it doesn't look like, if this was just a mistake, it is reflective of deep incompetence and I think a lack of, let's say, a lack of judgment, discernment as to what was possibly going to happen in that case. And also just truly, I cannot imagine, or let me just put it this way, I don't even care that, they say they were trying to hit a different part of this area. It was obviously endangering the lives of civilians. I mean, it was so obviously endangering the lives of civilians and many civilians. And people, by the way, this makes it harder down the road for Israel to do evacuations of civilians because they don't trust it. They're in areas that they're supposed to be safe. So why leave their homes and their families if the place that they're trekking to is going to be unsafe, if they're just going to get killed in another part of Gaza, if their children are just going to get killed in another part of Gaza. So, I mean, I think Netanyahu is trying to balance all of the international pressures here, but this is such a blatant, if it's a mistake, that in and of itself is reflective of something horrible, if we even take them at their word of that.
Yeah, and it didn't seem like it led to much reflection, because we can put up A5 here. Al Jazeera, by the way, has been banned in Israel. And so their reporters have been yanked. There was that incident where they even took an AP camera from near Gaza because
But then
Al Jazeera and they gave it back, but because Al Jazeera had was using AP as a wire service. But so instead they have Hind Qadri, who's a freelance journalist in Gaza. Here she is reporting from one of the areas that is supposed to be a designated safe zone. To Emily's point, let's play this interview with Hind.
I went back just right now to the last leaflet the Israelis dropped on Rafah, and the place that was targeted right now was block 2360. In this leaflet, the Israeli forces mentioned that they're calling people to evacuate to all the areas, the humanitarian areas, to Deir al-Balah, Khan Yunis, and Al-Mawasi area. And one of these areas that was mentioned is block 2360, which has been targeted right now. So yes, this place was designated as safe. This place was designated as a humanitarian area, according to the last leaflet that was dropped by the Israeli forces on people in Rafah.
And the other key point, if we can put up A6 here, is that no matter what you think about which leaflets, which ones are included in the safe zone, which aren't, like as you're launching these missiles, as you're dropping these bombs, a drone is able to see what's below. And here's some images of what you see below. You can tell that you're dropping them basically onto a tent city.
Yes, obviously.
Just like setting all the complications aside.
So if you're listening to this, there's a map up on the screen where you see the just complete proximity to what Israel says it was targeting, to red tents and to the area that ended up being hit. And it is, I mean, words can't do justice. It's just so close. You should look up the map because this is by their own sort of admission. This is their own explanation for what happened. And, they say that this was their words, the precision attack in Northwest Rafah, they killed the chief of staff of Hamas. They killed a senior Hamas official, 2 deaths. That's according to the IDF. Now, I think if the ultimate goal is eliminating Hamas, even this precision strike, apparently, that killed 2 Hamas officials, according to the IDF again, when people are seeing everything else on their screens and they see and they think through the likelihood of Hamas being fully eliminated, it doesn't feel right. The calculations don't feel right to people. Right,
and it's fine to criticize Hamas for having its officials within civilian populations.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's great. But that is the case.
It's the reality.
All guerrilla armies from the American Revolutionary Army up until the Viet Cong through Hamas, that's what they do. The question is, what does their adversary do? And does the adversary respect international humanitarian law or laws of war? If you have a couple of Hamas figures surrounded by civilians in tents, that two wrongs don't make a right. Doesn't mean you drop a bomb and blow up all the tents there and incinerate people within them.
Well, especially when the ultimate goal of, quote, eliminating Hamas, right? That is not an attainable goal.
Right, exactly. Set aside the morality of it. Getting rid of 2 senior officials who can be replaced by other mid-level officials.
And will.
And then creating enormous global backlash against yourself and leading to the recruitment of, I would imagine that Hamas has more people trying to enlist, from Gaza than it has the capacity to kind of arm and structure into an organization at this point.
Yeah.
Like they start out with 30,000, they could kill all 30,000.
Yeah.
But if you're living through that, you're probably just going to be like, sign me up. Why not?
I think there's a really serious argument that none of this is making Israelis safer in the long run.
That's the counterterror argument that people like David Petraeus always made, that you can't kind of kill your way out of it.
Yeah.
The old, every terrorist you kill creates 2 or 3. Do we take that seriously or not?
Yeah.
And so Nikki Haley certainly doesn't. One of the more psychotic things that I've seen in this war, and it's not unique to this one, but it does, social media puts it in our face a lot more, is this phenomenon of tourists going over to Israel and signing, putting messages on bombs. So Nikki Haley, boasting here, she writes, finish them. Like she's signing a yearbook. She writes, America hearts Israel.
Yes.
Always Nikki Haley.
It is like a yearbook. That's exactly what it looks like in her loopy cursive. America hearts Israel, always Nikki Haley, finish them. Ryan, she should have signed the GBU 39, the Boeing.
It's from South Carolina, right? Boeing's main headquarters is in her. She was on the board, right?
She was on the board of Boeing until she ran for president, and that GBU 39 is what was used, as we mentioned earlier. The element is A0. If we put it back up in the screen, that's the one that was used by Israel in the tent city attack in Rafah, as Jordan points out here. So really, Nikki Haley should have been signing that old GBU 39.
Yes, and Nikki Haley saw her wealth explode after being governor of South Carolina, largely by joining Boeing.
Yeah.
And using her political power to make sure, that they can sell more weapons to the United States, weapons that were then sent to Israel, weapons that were then dropped on this Rafah tent encampment that then incinerated a lot of women and children while she was there signing other bombs.
I bet she didn't anticipate that, by the way. I tried to pin down the exact timing. It's hard to know when the picture was actually taken because when it was posted and taken is different. And I actually did try to chase down the bottom of when that was happening. It was pretty difficult to know for sure what the timing was on that. But certainly, it reminds me actually of a lot of what happened during the Cold War, where my fellow conservatives were sort of doing something very similar and reveling in the brazenness of, the Contras, a good example of the Contras. And, because they ultimately believed this was a just war, that this was Manichaean, good versus evil. And I actually respect the position of completely owning it and being honest. And so to some extent, respect to you, Nikki Haley, for putting it all on display. Kids are being
she's all in, that's for sure.
Burned in a tent camp. And it's clarity, if anything.
Politically, it's not like she's actually putting herself at risk.
But it's, yes.
But yes, absolutely.
But she's actually totally aware of the scene on the international stage, aware of all the social media images of children, of women, of the just utter destruction. And she's saying, I don't give an F, basically. Finish them.
U.S. apparently doesn't give much of an F about building things. If you want a metaphor for the entire policy, you can put this element up from CNN. The U.S. pier constructed off Gaza has broken apart. Images that were floating around the internet, Halal Flow had one of it just sinking, and people filming it just kind of laughing at, oh my God, just the dark comedy of it all. Looks like Mac was saying X-ray of a broken pinky.
Yeah,
there.
It does.
I was told by sources there that now the U.S. military is contracting tugboats at massive expense to try to fix a bunch of this. There were workers stranded on the beach, basically, with not even sleeping bags. I mean, that's all suffering is relative, but workers who signed up to build this pier did not sign up to sleep overnight in Gaza on the beach with no tent, no sleeping bag, no real certainty of what was going to happen next, because there's this huge fear among American policymakers that they can't ever have an American soldier boot on the ground. So they have to try to figure out how they're going to not build this or build this without that potentially happening. So the workers end up taking the lumps. And the $320 million, but that's only what's been spent so far.
Yeah.
Now, fixing this.
2 months, by the way. Biden, people remember, he kind of caught the Pentagon off guard by announcing this very politically in his State of the Union speech. So that's March. It's operational by, I think the date was May 17th. So $320 million. $320 million for 1,000 metric tons of aid that got into Gaza. Now, whether that was actually distributed is another question.
No evidence has even been distributed, that's right.
But Sabrina Singh, said 1,000 metric tons. That's our government's own explanation that's their own number for how much was brought in a 2-month, $320 million project that saw people being fired at, that broke apart, that had just the most embarrassing saga. It's the most embarrassing life arc, and was damaged by rough seas, as the New York Times put in a headline this morning.
Right, they claim rough seas. What I was told is that it was basically high tide. Like, it's not even, like, there were no real rough seas. Like, there are rough seas in the Mediterranean.
Who could have seen it coming?
But apparently this was just basically high tide.
It was just the high tide.
Yeah. There's some very gentle spring breezes, which it just couldn't stand up. So, and all of this just because Israel wouldn't let in sufficient amounts of aid through just overland. It's like, why are we building a pier? Isn't it connected by land to Israel and Egypt? Like, we could just move aid in through trucks.
Yes, and aren't you still going to have a distribution problem when the aid gets to the land?
And the other idiotic thing was, they're like, oh, well, they won't let aid in through these choke points here, so we'll build a pier over here, and then that will move things faster. Instead, the IDF sent all of its inspectors over to Cyprus and just blocked everything at Cyprus, so it couldn't even get on the ships and get over to the pier. It's like, your problem was not a lack of entry points into Gaza.
It's a $320 million public relations effort.
Right. Well, a lot of people thought it was like this was the beginning of like the U.S. occupation of Gaza. So I guess at least the upside is no.
Yeah, that's true.
They can't even get it to like keep floating.
In fairness, I mean, there were people fired on, and had an American, whether a contractor or troops, gotten like actually severely hurt, killed, which easily could have happened. Totally. Easily could have happened. So to some extent, it's just luck, sheer dumb luck. Even in this ridiculous arc of the pier, that it didn't become something bigger.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.